All right, I got a ton of ground to cover tonight. I was thinking about letting you pick the passages, and I was thinking about letting you ask questions. And let me ask you this question before I jump right in. And Bella, right on cue. I'm talking, she's screaming. It's awesome. That's all right. She'll get used to the sound of my voice, and it'll put her to sleep before long. What is your favorite Bible story? Lillian. I need something more than What? Sorry. Noah and the flood? Noah and the ark. All right. Talara. Esther. Great. Adam and Eve. Very cool story. I like Adam and Eve. We would have had no beginning without them. Becca. Really? Never saw that one coming. Titus. Daniel and what? Daniel and the lions. Then, because there's quite a few good stories in the book of Daniel. Lukey. I'm not sure which version of the Bible he popped into, but it's not mine. I learned a long time ago you don't give a kid a mic. I'm going to have to amend that so you don't give a kid the floor. All right, Gideon. You like the story of Gideon? All right. Benjamin. The Bible. That's kind of broad. BC. Joshua. Which part of Joshua? What? The one with the glasses and the panda hat. Okay. I'm assuming it was the Wall of Jericho, but anyway. Brianna, you guys are killing me. Jesus being born. That's a great story. We get to do that one every year. That's awesome. All right. Any adults? You have favorite Bible stories? Pastor Carl. Joseph. Which story of Joseph? The whole thing. That's a good story. It's a long story, but it's a good story. All right. Anybody else have what's that? Saul, Paul. Okay, the conversion of Saul. That's a good story. Jesus in the boat. That one has a special meaning for us. Jesus sleeping in the boat because he's got it all under control. He can just go to sleep. I especially like the nap part of that. She likes this Jesus being secure part of that because it just means napping is godly. Cece. Jesus walking on water. That's pretty cool. Anybody ever done that? Have you seen the articles about the Jesus lizard? That it's so fast that it can actually run across the water. It's light. It's got webbed feet and it just runs like the wind and just right across the water. The Jesus lizard. Pretty cool. Somebody look it up. We already went. Oh, you're going to amend it to be the Brown Bible. Good. All right. So Brianna, did you already go? Oh, you got two favorites? Okay. Jonah. All right. You know, it's a difficult question to ask, and it's a difficult question to answer because if you've read the Bible much or you've heard the Bible much, and around here we do a lot of Bible, that's kind of a big deal for us, you begin to like it all. You know, I got to think about it. What would my favorite story in the Bible be? And it's usually the one I'm reading because I really enjoy it. But one of my absolute favorite, I think my absolute favorite is actually Peter being released from prison. I just think it is just comical. The angel kicking Peter in the ribs because he's so worried about it. He's sleeping like a brick. And he's like, hey, wake up. We're bringing you here. And then the faith of the church, of course, was great in that one. And that would be my favorite. My second favorite is a story I hope to preach someday. If not, we're going to get it in Sunday school. But it's when the last Jebusite on the mountains just outside of what is now Jerusalem was Jebus back in the day. David had numbered the people, and God sent the death angel in to punish David by killing the people. There's a whole weird story in that. But, David is running up the mountain to make a sacrifice to God to stop the death angel. And the death angel is coming down the mountain to kill people. And there was this one Jebusite dude stuck in the middle and didn't know which way to run. And that was kind of funny to me. My third favorite, it's the one I want to get you to tonight. It's John chapter 9. You do? Samson. Ooh, that's a sordid little story, isn't it? So John chapter 9, The story for me, this whole chapter is one story, so we're going to try to move quickly here. But it breaks out to really kind of two parts. There is the miracle that Jesus performs, and then there is the aftermath. The aftermath takes far too long, but it's kind of interesting. You'd think that this would be cool. Well, let me begin. John chapter 9, verse 1. Now as Jesus passed by, he saw a man who was blind from birth. How long had this guy been blind? His entire life, right? He was blind from birth. You don't get much blinder than that. Nothing happened to him. He was born that way. He had never known what it was like to see anything. And his disciples asked Jesus, saying, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Now here is the prevailing thought of their day, that if something bad happened to you, it meant that you had done something bad. Makes sense, doesn't it? That if you sin, God is going to punish you. That's what happens, right? And so if something bad has happened to you, then God must be punishing you, and so somebody must have sinned. And they wanted to know who had sinned, this guy or his parents. Now, what's the big problem with that? Actually, there's a lot of big problems with that one. First big problem is, if this guy was born blind, when would he have had to have sinned in order to be punished by being born blind? Before he was born. Okay, I got a problem with that one, just, going to say. So I'm thinking either they don't know his backstory or their head is just so stuck in theological mud that they can't get it out. And I think it was probably the latter. And so you have that. Or his parents being born. Now, what is the problem with that? Does God punish you for the sins your parents commit? No. You may bear consequences, but you do not get punished for it. God judges each of us according to our own choices and our own actions. And so their question was just completely off base, but it also assumes that anytime something bad happens, it is always punishment for sin. Is that true? No. And so their question is, it's as far out in left field as you can get and still be, kind of in the game. But they just completely missed this guy's state, and he completely missed the problem going on here. But on the surface, doesn't that sound good? That if something bad is happening to you, then God must be judging you. Or God must be judging your parents by getting back at you. Doesn't that sound religious? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? Sounds very religious. I'm not a real big fan of religion. But, verse 3, Jesus sets them straight. Neither this man nor his parents sinned. So Jesus said, guys, this isn't judgment. This guy didn't sin before he was born, and his parents didn't sin, and God's not judging him for his parents' sin. But look what he says. But that the works of God should be revealed in him. But that the works of God should... This guy was born blind. You know why this guy was born blind? So that Jesus could heal him and somebody could write it down, and God would be glorified because Jesus healed him. Now, how's that for cool in God's plan? It's not so cool if you're the guy born blind. I'll give you that one. But Jesus said no. He was born this way so that the glory of God could be revealed in him. It had nothing to do with anything human. This is all to do with providence. Verse 4, I must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Jesus said, I am the light of the world as long as I'm here. But he also said, when he leaves, who's the light of the world? We are, right. He said, you are the light of the world. So his followers, when Jesus left, he said, look, I'm the light of the world as long as I'm here, but as soon as I'm gone, you're going to be the light of the world. We need to take that seriously. When he said these things in verse 6, this is great. How many of you love spitting? So this is a boy verse, right? When he said these things, he spat on the ground, and he made clay with the saliva. This is Luke caliber stuff, right? And he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay. So he spit in the ground, and he rubs it around, and he gets some mud going, and then he picks up that mud, and he takes the dude, and he rubs it on his eyes. I'm hoping they were closed. But they may have been open. Who knows, right? This is awesome stuff, right? This is, the girls are going, ew, he did what? Yeah, it happens. Oh, Ephesians, let's try John. There we go. But remember this. Remember how he heals him. Because Jesus he heals several blind guys. He never does it the same way twice. And he said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which is translated sent. So he went and washed and came back healed, seeing. Suddenly this guy who was born blind, who never knew what it was to see his entire life, Jesus spit in the dirt, made some mud, rubbed it on the dude's face, sent him to go wash in the pool. Now, how did he get there? He probably asked somebody, because I'm thinking, it's a bit dark when you can't see. But he got there, and he washed in the pool, and he opened his eyes, and guess what? He could see for the first time in his life. Is that a miracle? Yeah. Is it a big miracle? We see this in the Bible. Jesus, gave people back their sight. How many times do you see that in the Bible? A few times? It's almost enough. You hear it enough times that it's right up there with raising people from the dead. And you're like, okay, he gave back the guy his sight. Yawn. Move on. Next miracle, next story. We need to stop and take note of this. Of all the miracles that Jesus did in the Gospels, which is the only miracle that somebody else didn't do? He didn't. Nobody else raised themselves from the dead, so we'll give you that one. And nobody else restored sight. Not specifically we're told this. The Jews' idea was, and after you get into the New Testament, you may see some of that because, again, they're working in the power of Jesus. But the Jews had this belief that only God could restore sight. Had people raised people from the dead before? Yes or no? Yeah, at least a couple times, right? Elijah raised that widow woman's son back to life. Any other things in the Old Testament you can think of? Somebody raised somebody back from life? I'm thinking there's one more and it's just escaping me. At any rate, doesn't matter. And so this is what the Jews thought, though. The Jews were of the persuasion, they were of the belief that only God could restore sight, that only God could create vision. And so this, to a Jew, was a very big deal. The few times that this happens, should be a very big deal because this is something only God can do. So file away a couple thoughts. The mud thing and only God can restore sight. Let's keep moving. Let's see, verse 8. So now that is the miracle, 1 through 7. Verse 8, now we get into the aftermath. Therefore the neighbors and those who previously had seen that he was blind said, "Is not this he who sat and begged?" And so there's a question mark in their mind. Hey, is that the dude who was sitting over there begging? What had happened to this guy? I mean, you think about the transformation of going from blind to seeing. Does that change you? Well, for starters, you stop walking into stuff. That's a good start. But suddenly you can have confidence. Instead of always approaching the world kind of stooped over and feeling your way around the world, you just stand up and you walk. And so the physical change in this guy, the way he carried himself, he could actually see to brush his hair. Who knows? Maybe he did that. He could see to put colors to match, and maybe he changed and put something on that matched. Who knows? Because when you're blind and you can't see what you're wearing, you get everybody's cast-offs. It doesn't matter if it matches. It's just got a cover. And so there are a lot of things that could have happened to this guy. Suddenly he sees, and his neighbors and people who knew him were like, I don't know, man. Is that the guy who was born blind? It kind of looks like him, but it kind of doesn't. Some said, this is he. Others said, he is like him. He looks like him, but I don't think it's the same guy. And he said, I am he. Hey, yeah, that's me. I was the guy that was born blind. That was me. Therefore, they said to him, how were your eyes opened? Now, there's an honest question. Because I don't know about you. Some of you know this, but, you take off your glasses, and I'm right up next to blind. So if you suddenly one day wore glasses and the next day you came in and you could see, I'd be real curious as to how that happened because I'd like to know. But here's some people who just, they were curious. You were blind. You've been blind your entire life. Now you can see. How did that happen? Fair question, honest question. Verse 11, he answered and said, a man called Jesus made clay and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to the pool of Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and I received my sight. That's a pretty straight up account. Then they said to him, where is he? Well, that's kind of a hard question, isn't it? Because last time he saw Jesus, he didn't exactly see Jesus, did he? Jesus was like, you go and wash, and Jesus walked away. Well, how's a blind man going to know where he went? He didn't. And so the honest answer was, I do not know. I was blind last time I was in his presence. It's kind of hard to tell you where he went, what he looks like, who he is. Maybe if he spit on me again, I'd know, but that's about it. That was it. Do you think they were excited for him? Do you think they were happy? Or do you think they were suspicious? When I look at the reaction of the people who knew him, I see a people who doubted. They doubted. They doubted this was the guy. They doubted the story. They doubted that he could see. They doubted, all of this. I mean, the one thing, once they figured out it really was the dude, it's hard to doubt the fact that he could see, because clearly he's not walking into stuff, but they doubted. Is that a great reaction? I've been made well. I can see now. Are you sure? Just not so sure. I'm not sure I believe you. This is not the excitement that you would expect from friends and family who no longer have to cart this guy around, who no longer have to provide for him, who no longer have to babysit him to make sure he doesn't hurt himself, who no longer have to walk him around with his hand, from point A to point B. Suddenly they're freed of all of that. You'd think they'd be excited. Or how about just happy for the dude because he can see? Instead, they doubt. Not exactly probably the reaction he was looking for. Verse 13, it gets worse before it gets better. They brought him who formerly was blind, so now he's the formerly blind dude, to the Pharisees. It was a Sabbath when Jesus made the clay and opened his eyes. Now that's significant. It was a Sabbath. So what days of the week is a Sabbath? Saturday. What are Jews supposed to do on the Sabbath? Nothing. They're supposed to rest. Now, it's unfair to say do nothing, because doing anything is doing something. And so there were limits about what you could do. You had to eat, and so there was a bit of light prep work that you were allowed. You had to walk because there was no cars, and so there were short distances that you were allowed to walk. So it's not fair to say that they did nothing, but the intent of the day was that they were to rest. And so it's noted for us that it was a Sabbath day that Jesus made the clay and healed the guy. Two problems. First problem is one that you probably don't see. The second problem is one that you might. Does it use power to heal somebody? I mean, this is Jesus. This is God in the flesh. It's not a big flex for him, I'll be honest. But, he just did expend energy. It's not work. It's not like he went and created a new solar system or anything. He just, healed this guy's eyes, right? But there's still, there's a little bit of effort. But considering he's Jesus and the amount of power he has, is that really a Sabbath-breaking amount of power that he used? I would argue no. But here's the problem the Jews had with that. It wasn't the fact that he healed the guy, because they weren't terribly convinced that he had. The problem was he had spat. That was their problem. He spit on the Sabbath. Did you know that there is a law that says you can't spit on the Sabbath? The Pharisees had a rule that you couldn't spit on the Sabbath. Anybody knowing why? Two things. It takes power. Not really. It takes power. But two things happen when you spit. First of all, you make mud, and that's work. How many of you are like, yeah, right? Second of all, when you spit on the ground, you move one piece of dirt and another piece of dirt. You might actually part dirt. And you know what we call it when you part dirt? We call that plowing. You say, come on. I lie not. This is where the Pharisees were in Jesus' day. To spit on the ground was plowing, and that's work. That is the majority of their problem. You're going, like, what are these dudes on? Seriously, this is where they were. And so they bring him. Interestingly enough, there are several branches of religious leaders they could have brought him to. Where do they bring him to? The Pharisees, the one with the rules about spitting. Sadducees don't care less. There's a couple other religious groups, and they couldn't care less either. But the Pharisees, man, that's work. They're the zealots of the zealots, and this is plowing. That's not acceptable. So they take him to the Pharisees. Verse 15. Then the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. Fair enough question. How did it happen? Give us your testimony. He said to them, he put clay on my eyes, I washed and I see. The story got shorter. I'm getting tired of telling it, I think. Especially since nobody actually believes him. Therefore, some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God because he does not keep the Sabbath. Why doesn't he keep the Sabbath? Yeah, exactly. That was their problem. Then they said to the blind man again, what do you say about him because he opened your eyes? Now, here's the first group of people who want to know his opinion. What do you think about the guy who opened your eyes? I mean, he violated the Sabbath. What's your input here? What do you think? Now, this isn't just history. This is interpretation. He said, he is a prophet. I mean, here's a guy who, he's not sure. All he knows is he woke up this morning, he couldn't see, he can see now. And he's been rushed from disbelieving, from doubting neighbors to disbelieving Pharisees, and they're like, hey, what's your take on this? I'm like, I think he's a prophet. I think he's somebody from God. Why would he be somebody from God? I don't know. He restored my sight, and people don't just normally do that. I think he's from God. I think he's a prophet. But did they believe him? Verse 18, the Jews did not believe concerning him that he had been blind, and so he disbelieved and received a sight until they called his parents of him who had received sight. They're like, all right, bring his parents in here, let's go talk to his parents and make sure this is the right guy. So they actually drag his parents out of their retirement community into the temple here in the tabernacle and say, all right, now you tell us, is this really your son who was born blind? His parents in verse 20 answered and said, we know that this is our son, which was nice of them. Well, yeah, this is our son. We know that much. But by what means he now sees, we do not know. Or who opened his eyes, we do not know. And they probably didn't, other than what he had told them. He is of age. Ask him, he will speak for himself. We're not saying nothing. Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Dad. They were totally not going to step up to the plate for them. They're like, he's our son. You want to know anything else? Ask him. He's old enough to answer for himself. Yeah. This is the kind of instruction you get when you're in trouble, right? He can answer for himself. You kid be getting arrested. Yeah, he's of age. He can do it himself. Something going on. Yeah, they can answer for themselves. In trouble at school. Yeah, he's old enough. He can answer for himself. This dude had been healed. He wasn't in trouble. Shouldn't have been. But he was. His parents, in verse 22, said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone confessed that he was Christ, that he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore, his parents said, he is of age. Ask him. Mom and Dad cowered in fear of getting kicked out of their religious community. And they were so pressured by the religious community around them that they couldn't even be thankful, be grateful, be happy, be celebratory over the fact that their son who had been born blind could see. Isn't that just like awesome family dynamic there? Isn't that what you'd want from your family to say? Well, congratulations and all, but get away from me. I don't want what you got. But I'm blind. I'm seeing. Should be happy. So they again called the man who was blind and said to him, give God the glory. We know that this man is a sinner. Now, which this man are they speaking of? Jesus. Hey, you, come here. Give God glory, because this dude you've been talking to, we know he's a sinner. So you better start glorifying God for what he's done for you. If he did it. We're not sure. Verse 25, he answered and said, whether he is a sinner or no, I do not know. One thing I know, that though I was blind, now I see. This guy, just a minute ago, he's like, he's a prophet. He's somebody from God. He goes, I don't know who this man is. I don't know how this man lives. All I know is when I woke up this morning, I could not see, but I can now. You ever been there? That God did something in your life, and you can't really explain it, but all you know is it's there. It's real. Something happened. And all of a sudden, somebody starts applying a little bit of pressure to you, and your only fallback position, and it's an honest one, is to say, I don't know. Here's what I can tell you. This is my experience. I was blind, but now I can see. I was lost, but now I'm found. I was just meandering through life, and now I have purpose. I knew that I was dirty, but now I'm clean. There's a lot of things that we can say that we don't really understand, but we know what happened to us. Experience is the one thing that it's hard to argue against, especially in our culture. People will argue theology, and they will argue philosophy, and they will argue over the minutia of any detail and fact that you might give them. But when you say, this is what I have experienced, we live in a day where experience trumps a fact. It's hard to argue with. This is my experience. And that's what the guy said. Look, this is my experience. And then they said to him in verse 26, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? You're beginning to feel like this is redundant? Anybody? Feel like this is like, belaboring a point? Like this is just going from bad to worse? Like really, you're going to ask me this exact same question again? He answered them in verse 27, and you can hear the frustration. I told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? He's like, why do you keep asking me? Are you going to start to believe my answer? Are you going to start to follow him if I tell you again? A little frustrated? I would be. He was. Then they reviled him and said, you are his disciple, but we are Moses' disciples. We know that God spoke to Moses. As for this fellow, Jesus, we do not know where he is from. Which was not true. They did. But anyway. The man answered and said to them, why, this is a marvelous thing that you do not know where he is from, yet he has opened my eyes. Now we know that God does not hear sinners. He's going to whip out some theology on them. We know that God does not hear sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, he hears him. He's like, look, if this guy were a sinner, his prayers would be bouncing off the ceiling all day long. God doesn't listen to sinners. The fact that God answered this guy's prayer tells us about something about who he is. Since the world began, it has been unheard of that anyone opened the eyes of one who was born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. Wow. Just throw down the big book and shut the room down. Because he did. I mean, what are you going to answer to that? I mean, he just took their theology and shoved it right down their throat. And he was right. They were actually right when they said it, but they were wrong when they're trying to ignore what they already taught. He said, look, this guy has got to be from God because this has never happened before. You don't see it because you don't want to see it. They answered and said to him, you can imagine how happy they were about this, right? They answered and said to him, you were completely born in sins, and are you teaching us? You big fat heathen liar, how dare you say these things? You're going to teach us like you know anything? Because when you've been beat, logically, the only thing left is to start calling names and raise your voice. And they cast him out. Threw him out of the synagogue. And so here you got a guy that was healed, but in the aftermath, he's doubted, and he is disbelieved, and he is disdained, and now he has been disowned. Because to be cast out of the synagogue is to be completely cut off from the religious community. And when you're in a very religious community, to be cast out of your religious community means you've been cast out of everything. You are now friendless. You are now peerless. You are now alone. Nobody wants to talk to you. Nobody wants to know you at all. Now, what had this guy done wrong? He had been healed. Wow, that's a tough one, isn't it? And all of a sudden, he finds himself completely cut off from everybody in his culture because he'd been healed. You begin to sense that maybe that's not fair. That's not just. You know what this is? This is religion in action. This is exactly what religion does. If I can't control it and I can't explain it, then you must be wrong. And if you're going to stick to your guns, you're out of here. Now, who was right? Was the formerly blind guy right? Yeah. Were the religious people wrong? Yeah. Do religious people ever admit to being wrong? Not on your life. So they kicked him out after calling him names. Fortunately, that is not where the story ends. Because after he was disowned, he was discovered. Look at verse 35. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him. So Jesus actually had heard. It was all the hullabaloo around town that this guy had been healed and had been cast out of the synagogue. So Jesus is like, I know he doesn't know what I look like, so I better go find him. And Jesus went and found him. Jesus went looking for him. He said to him, do you believe in the Son of God? He answered and said, who is he, Lord, that I may believe in him? I'm ready to believe. I've been healed. I know it was God. I'm ready to believe in whatever God has put in my way. I don't know who the Son of God is. Fortunately, Jesus does know, doesn't he? And Jesus said to him, you have both seen him, and it is he who is talking with you. Let's see, did Jesus ever claim to be God? Yeah, I'm thinking, this might count. He's like, you've just seen him, and he's the guy talking to you right now. It's just a clever way of saying, yeah, that's me. I'm God the Son. Yeah, we're good. And then he said, Lord, I believe. And he worshiped him. The idea of worship being he just literally collapsed at his feet in gratitude and just awe. And he probably did. He probably did, just right there. And just worshiped. And Jesus said to him, for judgment I have come into the world, that those who do not see may see, and that those who see may be made blind. So he's discovered, he's discipled, Jesus is teaching him. But in verse 40, something interesting happens. Some of the Pharisees who were with him, because Jesus had an entourage of Pharisees who their job was to hang out with Jesus, not to learn of him, but to learn what he's saying so they could counter it and take it back to base and dissect it and find something wrong with what Jesus said and what Jesus did. And so this entourage of Pharisees who followed him said to him, are we blind also? Jesus said, I've come to make sure those who couldn't see, the blind people, were made able to see. And those who think they can see, I'm here to make sure they know they're blind. And the Pharisees, they're like, well, what about us? Are we blind? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no sin. But now you say we see. Therefore, your sin remains. Jesus just said, yep, you're blind too. The fact that you don't know you're blind just illustrates how blind you are. If you knew you had a need, I could heal you. I could fix you. I could restore you. But by virtue of the fact that you don't think you have a need, it just tells me that you are completely blind. Blind to the truth, blind to your own reality of who you are. Interesting story? How many of you have heard that story before? Here's why I like that story. A couple reasons. The blind guy, he was nobody. Absolutely nobody. But to Jesus, nobodies were kind of important. Because Jesus came to die on a cross for billions of nobodies. Here was a guy that had been designated just for a guy to be a teaching aid. He'd had a rough life. He was a beggar. He was a poor man. There was no wealth in blindness. But Jesus cared. And Jesus came to him, and Jesus healed him. I think that's amazing because that's been my experience with Jesus. Though I may have grown up in church and though I may not have seemed that bad to people, I understood that I was broken and that I could not see straight. And I don't mean with these things. And Jesus restored my sight. He fixed me. He healed me. But what I most love about this is probably the darker part of it, is how the religious crowd responded. That here was the religious crowd who they were right. They were okay in their own eyes. They had it all together. Their religion said, we are good. We're good. We don't need healing. We don't need anything. We've got all the answers. We've got all the solutions. We're good. We need nothing. We are completely self-sufficient in our religion. And Jesus' answer was, no, you're completely lost, blind in your religion. I get accused sometimes of being a religious person, which is always humorous. But, people assume, well, you're a pastor. You must be religious. No, not really. I have a way of ticking off religious people. I really do. And I'm actually okay with that. Because religious people were not people that Jesus liked very much either. He gave them a hard time. Because religious people, and it's true of today as much as any day, they think they're all right. They think they're secure and they have it all together in their religion. And they actually don't even need Jesus. You say, which religion is like that? All of them. That's a common element of every religion. No religion needs Jesus. No religion needs healing, needs anything, because they got it all together. But as soon as you have an experience that rocks their boat a little bit, they get ticked off. The interesting thing about having a relationship with Jesus is we have an experience that rocks their boat a little bit. And so if you run up against, now I don't go out of my way to offend people, I really don't. But when you have a relationship with Jesus, sometimes the freedom that relationship gives you and just the knowingness of God that gives you can be offensive to people. And you've got to say, that's cool, man. Because Jesus ticked off religious people all day long. I think sometimes he had a lot of fun with that, actually. Not very politically correct, our Jesus. So I enjoy that story. I hope you do too. Not that I say we should go out of our way to offend religious people, but it's far more important to have a experiential relationship with the God of the universe than it is to have a religion about the God of the universe. Get me? I heard a great line, very King Jamesian, understandest thou this? Or diggest thou this? Diggest thou this? That's what it was. All right. We have